A homeless girl speaks to the young billionaire. "Don't you need a baby, sir? Take my little brother. He's 4 months old and he's very hungry." Upon hearing this, the billionaire stopped and stood still when he saw a 5-year-old girl holding a baby in her arms. Ethan Carter straightened his tie as he crossed the gala hall. He had just closed a $300 million deal that consolidated his position in the real estate market. At 42 years old, he was one of the most respected businessmen in the country. Respected, but not necessarily liked. His calculated coldness was as famous as his talent for business. "Spectacular presentation, Carter," said one of the shareholders, raising a glass in his direction. "No one bet we could get that downtown property." Ethan just nodded, offering what passed for a smile on his usually serious face. Social formalities were, to him, just another part of the business game, one he mastered perfectly. "If you'll excuse me, I have other commitments," he announced, checking the platinum watch on his wrist. It was an excuse. He had no real commitments beyond going back to his empty mansion, reviewing a few contracts, and sleeping. That was practically every night's routine. The icy winter air greeted him as he exited the hotel. A light snowfall covered the city, turning the streets into quiet white paths. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the cold clear his lungs. He liked that feeling. "Your car will be here in a few minutes, Mr. Carter," the valet informed him, shivering slightly in a uniform not nearly warm enough for the weather. "No rush," Ethan replied, stepping a bit away from the entrance. That was when he noticed movement among the snow-covered bushes decorating the hotel's facade. At first, he thought it might be some animal, maybe a cat seeking shelter. But then he saw clearly a small human figure emerging from the shadows. A girl, very small, maybe 5 years old, wearing a worn-out red coat several sizes too big for her. What truly captured Ethan's attention, however, was what she carried in her arms. A baby wrapped in a thin blanket, almost disappearing in the older child's protective embrace. Ethan looked around, expecting to see an adult nearby, distracted parents, perhaps, who had let their children wander off alone. But there was no one. Just the girl, the baby, and the relentless falling snow. The girl approached with hesitant steps, her extraordinarily blue eyes fixed on Ethan. There was something unsettling in her gaze, a mixture of despair and determination that did not belong on a child's face. "Don't you need a baby, sir? Take my little brother. He's 4 months old and he's very hungry," she said, her small voice rising in a desperate cry that froze Ethan in place. For a moment, he was simply too shocked to respond. In 2 decades of merciless negotiations, he had faced all kinds of difficult situations. But this, a child offering her own brother to a stranger, was completely outside his field of experience. "Where are your parents?" he finally managed to ask, trying to keep his voice neutral. The girl took another step forward, adjusting the baby in her small arms. "Mom went to get some food," she explained, her voice now lower. "It's been a long time." The baby let out a weak, almost inaudible cry, and Ethan watched as the girl immediately tried to soothe him, rocking him awkwardly. "How long?" Ethan asked, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "Since the sun was high," she answered, pointing to the night sky. It was almost midnight now. No mother would leave 2 small children alone for so many hours, especially on a winter night. Something was very wrong. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his voice calm so he wouldn't scare her. "Luna," the girl answered, "and this is Theo." "Luna," Ethan repeated. "I can't just take your brother." Her eyes filled with tears. "But he's really hungry. And it's really cold out here." It was in that moment that something unexpected happened inside Ethan Carter, a tightness in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since, well, he couldn't even remember the last time. It was as if an invisible hand was squeezing his heart. His Bentley arrived, gliding smoothly to the entrance. The driver, Charles Dow, got out quickly to open the door but froze upon seeing the scene. His boss crouched, talking to a child holding a baby. "Mr. Carter?" he asked, confused. Ethan made a decision that defied his rational, calculating nature. "Luna, would you and Theo like to come with me? I can take you somewhere warm, give you food and look after your brother." The girl narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "But how will Mom find us later?" The question hit Ethan like a punch. This child still believed her mother would return. "We can leave a message," he improvised. "We'll say where you are so she can find you." Luna considered the offer with a seriousness surprising for someone so young. When the baby cried again, she seemed to come to a decision. "Okay," she agreed. "Theo needs a bottle." Ethan stood up, signaling to Charles. "Please help her into the car and turn the heat on full." "Yes, sir," the driver replied, still visibly perplexed but without questioning. "May I hold your brother while you get in?" Ethan asked Luna. She hesitated, hugging the baby tighter. Then, as if she had reached a conclusion after some internal deliberation, she handed the small bundle to Ethan. The baby's weight in his arms was surprisingly light. Through the thin blanket, he felt how cold that little body was. Carefully, he adjusted the fabric to see the child's face better. Pale cheeks, slightly bluish lips, half-closed eyes. "We'll take care of you, Theo," he murmured, getting into the car where Luna was already waiting for him. During the drive to his mansion, Ethan made 2 calls, one to his personal doctor, requesting he come immediately to his home, and another to the housekeeper, instructing her to prepare everything for the children's arrival. "We'll need baby formula, diapers, clean and warm clothes," he ordered, "and prepare the guest room next to mine." Luna watched everything in silence, her eyes moving between Ethan, the baby, and the snowy scenery outside. "Is your house far?" she finally asked. "Not too far. We're almost there." She nodded, serious. "Will Theo make it?" The question struck Ethan deeply. This girl, this child, was shouldering responsibilities that shouldn't be hers. "Yes, Luna. And once we arrive, a doctor will check if he's okay." "Doctors are expensive," she noted, an adult concern in a child's voice. "Don't worry about that," Ethan replied. "I'll take care of everything." As the car passed through the iron gates of the Carter estate and drove up the lit driveway, Luna pressed her face against the window, mouth agape. "Do you live in a castle?" The question almost drew a smile from Ethan. "No, it's just a big house. Bigger than the whole building we live in," she remarked, still gazing outside. Mrs. Powell, the Carter family housekeeper for 3 decades, was already waiting by the door. Her usually impassive face could not hide her surprise at seeing Ethan step out of the car with a baby in his arms, followed by a small girl. "Mr. Carter," she greeted, quickly recovering. "I've prepared everything according to your instructions." "Thank you, Mrs. Powell." "This is Theo and this is Luna," he introduced. "They will be our guests tonight." Luna partly hid behind Ethan's leg, clearly intimidated by the housekeeper's formality. "Hello, dear," said Mrs. Powell, softening her expression. "I've made hot chocolate and some sandwiches. You must be hungry." Luna's eyes lit up at the mention of hot chocolate, but she maintained her defensive posture. "Has Dr. Morgan arrived?" Ethan asked, as he guided Luna inside the mansion. "He said he'd be here in 15 minutes, once, sir." "Great. Let's go into the living room. It's warmer there." The living room of the Carter mansion was rarely used by Ethan, who preferred the solitude of his office. But that night, the crackling fire transformed the formal space into something more inviting. Luna looked around in obvious admiration, her eyes taking in every detail: the paintings on the walls, the piano in the corner, the leather sofas. Ethan sat down, still holding Theo, and indicated that Luna do the same. She complied, though she kept a cautious distance. Mrs. Powell returned with hot chocolate and sandwiches. Luna looked at Ethan as if asking permission, and only after he nodded did she pick up a sandwich, taking a bite with evident pleasure. Soon Dr. Morgan arrived, a middle-aged man who had attended the Carter family for years. He carried his medical bag and an extra bag with baby supplies. "Ethan," he greeted, quickly assessing the situation. "These are our patients." "Yes, Dr. Morgan, this is Theo, and that is Luna." The doctor examined the baby first, working efficiently while asking Luna occasional questions. "He's around 4 months old from what I can tell," he concluded. "He's dehydrated and slightly hypothermic, but nothing severe. He'll be fine with proper feeding and basic care." The relief Ethan felt was inexplicably intense. The doctor prepared a bottle, and to his own surprise, Ethan offered to feed the baby. Hold him like this, instructed Doctor Morgan, adjusting Ethan's arms. Keep his head slightly elevated. Following the instructions, Ethan offered Theo the bottle, which the baby took eagerly. As he drank, his little eyes locked onto Ethan's face with surprising intensity. Luna watched everything, alternating between eating her sandwiches and checking on her brother. When it was her turn to be examined, she cooperated silently, answering the doctor's questions with a maturity that didn't match her age. "She's fine," Dr. Morgan announced, putting away his stethoscope. "A bit underweight, perhaps, but nothing concerning." After leaving detailed instructions, enough formula for several days, and other essential supplies, the doctor departed, promising to return the next morning. Mrs. Powell had prepared the guest room, an improvised crib for Theo and the bed made up for Luna, with clean clothes folded on a chair. "I think it's time for you two to get some rest," Ethan said, standing up with the now sleeping Theo in his arms. Luna looked reluctant. "What if Mom comes looking for us?" The question made Ethan's throat tighten. "Tomorrow we'll look for your mom, Luna. I promise. But for now you need to rest." In the bedroom, Luna glanced around suspiciously, as if expecting some kind of trick. "Can I stay with Theo?" she asked quietly. "Of course," Ethan replied, placing the sleeping baby in the improvised crib. "He'll be safe here. And I'll be in the room next door if you need anything." After helping her change, Ethan showed her the adjoining bathroom and explained how to call him if necessary. "Good night, Luna," he said, hesitating at the door. "Good night," she answered, already in bed but with her eyes wide open, still watchful. Ethan was about to leave when her voice stopped him. What's your name?" He realized with a pang of guilt that he had forgotten to introduce himself formally. Ethan Carter." Luna nodded, as if memorizing the information. "Thanks for not leaving us in the cold, Mr. Ethan." Something in that simple gratitude touched Ethan deeply. "You're welcome, Luna. Now get some rest." In his own room, Ethan couldn't sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the two children next door. What had happened to their mother? Why had she left them alone? And what was he supposed to do next? The logical answer would be to notify the authorities in the morning. That was the proper procedure, the rational approach. But when he thought about Luna and Theo being taken away, possibly separated and placed in foster care with strangers, Ethan felt an unexpected pang of anguish. Involuntarily, he remembered his own childhood. His father, Richard Carter, had always been a distant figure, more interested in building his empire than raising a son. After his mother's death, when Ethan was just 8, the emotional distance at home became almost palpable. He had never lacked anything materially. He attended the best schools, had every toy he could wish for. But the warmth, the sense of being truly loved and valued, that had always been missing. He sat on the bed, suddenly restless. How ironic that he, with all his wealth and power, felt such a strong connection to two abandoned children. Perhaps because he knew, better than anyone, the pain of emotional abandonment. He decided then and there that he would not hand Luna and Theo over to the authorities, not immediately at least. First, he would try to find their mother. He would use his resources, his contacts. If she had truly abandoned them, he would deal with that situation when the time came. He lay down again, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he fell asleep thinking not of contracts and acquisitions, but of childlike blue eyes and tiny fingers that clung to his own, as if he represented an unexpected hope in a cold, indifferent world. Ethan Carter, the man who had built his life around logic and control, had just taken the first step on a journey that would transform his world in ways he could never have imagined. Ethan twirled the pen between his fingers as he watched the man seated before him. Frank Donovan was considered the best private investigator in the city, discreet, efficient, and above all, relentless when it came to finding people. Exactly what Ethan needed now. "So what we've got," Frank said, consulting his notes, "is a woman named Maya, mother of 2 children, Luna, 5, and Theo, 4 months, who disappeared 3 days ago. Do we have any photo of her?" Ethan shook his head. "Unfortunately not. All I have is the description Luna gave me. Dark hair like hers, blue eyes, thin, in her 20s. Not much to go on, the detective commented, scratching his chin. Did the girl mention where they lived before? A red building near the park. She doesn't know the exact address. She said it was close to a store with a giant ice cream sign out front. Frank nodded, writing down the details. I'll start there. I'll also check hospitals, police stations, shelters, the usual places, any other info that might help. Ethan hesitated for a moment. Luna mentioned they sometimes didn't have enough food. I suspect they were in a desperate financial situation. Got it, the detective said, closing his notebook. Mr. Carter, I have to ask, what exactly is your relationship with this family? The question caught Ethan by surprise, though he should have expected it. From the outside, the situation certainly looked strange. A single businessman suddenly housing 2 children he had no apparent connection to. There's no prior relationship, he answered sincerely. I found the children abandoned and couldn't turn my back on them. The detective studied his face for a moment, as if searching for signs of deceit. Then he nodded, seemingly satisfied. I'll do my best to find her quickly. I'll keep you updated on any progress. After the detective left, Ethan remained in his office, contemplating the situation he had gotten himself into. A week ago, his life had been perfectly orderly and predictable. Now he had 2 children in his house and was hiring a private detective to find their mother. The sound of laughter interrupted his thoughts. Standing up, he walked to the door and opened it quietly. In the hallway, Luna was running barefoot, followed by Mrs. Powell, who carried a pair of tiny socks and a determined but gentle expression. Miss Luna, you must wear socks. The floor is cold, the housekeeper said, trying not to laugh at the girl's antics. I don't like socks. They tickle my toes, Luna protested, hiding behind a chair. It was the first time Ethan had seen her acting like a real child, playful, carefree. In the first few days, she had remained vigilant and serious, constantly checking on her brother and asking about her mother. Seeing her finally relaxed enough to play awakened a strange and comforting feeling in Ethan. Luna, he called gently, how about a deal? You wear the socks now, during lunch, and then you can go without them when we're in the room with the rug. What do you think? Luna considered the proposition, her blue eyes assessing the sincerity of the offer. Can I take them off at dessert time too? Ethan almost smiled. Deal. As he watched Mrs. Powell finally manage to put the socks on Luna's small feet, Ethan found himself thinking about how much his house had changed. The once quiet corridors now echoed with childish laughter and baby cries. The formal, immaculate rooms now had toys scattered around and baby bottles sterilizing. And most surprising, he didn't mind. In fact, the mansion felt more alive, more like home. During lunch, Luna excitedly talked about her new drawing, a family of colorful elephants who apparently lived in a house much like Ethan's mansion. And the baby elephant sleeps in a crib just like Theo's, she explained, in between spoonfuls of mashed potatoes. Really? And where do the big elephants sleep? Ethan asked, genuinely interested. In giant beds, but they always check on the baby before going to sleep, she replied seriously, just like you do with Theo. The observation took Ethan by surprise. It was true. He had developed a habit of checking on Theo several times during the night, making sure the baby was breathing peacefully. After lunch, while Luna took her afternoon nap and Theo slept in his crib, Ethan retreated once again to his office. There was work to be done, contracts to review. But for the first time in his career, the documents on his desk felt less urgent, less important. His cell phone rang. It was the office, probably some emergency related to the new acquisition. He answered with his usual efficiency, giving precise instructions on how to proceed. When he hung up, he noticed something curious. He hadn't felt the usual rush of adrenaline that accompanied corporate crises. Instead, his thoughts quickly returned to the children sleeping upstairs. What kind of magic was this, that 2 small creatures could exert such influence over him, transforming his priorities so completely in just a few days? That evening, while feeding Theo a bottle, Ethan contemplated the baby's peaceful little face. Theo's tiny fingers gripped his as he drank eagerly, his eyes focused on Ethan's face with absolute trust, both frightening and deeply moving. He likes you, said Luna, who was watching from the doorway, hugging the stuffed elephant Ethan had bought for her. "How do you know?" Ethan asked, curious about the child's logic. "Because he smiles when you show up, even when he's not hungry," she explained, stepping closer to gently stroke her brother's head. "Mom said babies only smile at special people." Those simple words touched Ethan more deeply than any professional accolade ever had. Being special to a baby he had known for only a few days felt inexplicably like a far greater achievement than any deal he had ever closed. Later, after putting both children to sleep, Ethan sat on the balcony with a glass of whiskey, looking at the stars. His phone buzzed. It was Frank Donovan. "I've got some leads," the detective reported. "I found a building matching the girl's description. Neighbors confirmed that a young mother with 2 small kids lived there until recently. I'm following her trail through some nearby shelters." "Great work," Ethan responded. "Keep looking." As he hung up, a contradictory feeling washed over him. On one hand, he wanted to find the children's mother. It was the right thing to do, and Luna certainly missed her. On the other hand, the idea of returning them and going back to his old life suddenly seemed empty. That was when the truth hit him with startling clarity. He had become attached to Luna and Theo. He didn't just care about their well-being, he loved them. In just 1 week, these 2 small creatures had found their way into his carefully guarded heart, awakening emotions he hadn't known he was still capable of feeling. What was even more frightening, for the first time in years, Ethan Carter, the man who had built an emotional fortress around himself after a neglected childhood, felt vulnerable. Vulnerable and paradoxically stronger than ever. Frank Donovan's call came while Ethan was helping Luna assemble a jigsaw puzzle in the living room. Baby Theo slept quietly in the newly purchased stroller, his tiny fists beside his face. "Mr. Carter," the detective's voice sounded urgent. "I found the children's mother." Ethan felt his heart race. After 2 weeks of searching, they had finally located Maya. He stood up from the rug, stepping a few paces away from Luna, who remained focused on fitting the colorful pieces together. "Where?" he asked quietly. "At New Hope Shelter, on the east side. It's a place for women in vulnerable situations," Frank explained. Well, sir, she's not in good shape. Apparently she was admitted a few days ago with pneumonia and malnutrition." "I'm going there right now," Ethan decided immediately. "Send me the address." He ended the call and looked at Luna, who raised her eyes from the puzzle, as if sensing something important had happened. "I need to go out for a few hours, Luna," he said, trying to sound casual. "Mrs. Powell will stay with you and Theo, is that okay?" Luna nodded slowly. "You're coming back, right?" The question hit Ethan like an arrow. In just 2 weeks, he had become a figure of stability for this child, who already knew far too well what abandonment felt like. "Yes, Luna, I promise I'll be back soon," he answered, crouching to her level. "And maybe I'll bring a surprise." Her eyes lit up. "A puppy?" Ethan almost smiled. "Not exactly, but I hope it's something good. Now finish your puzzle, okay?" 30 minutes later, Ethan was parking his car in front of a worn, gray building. The contrast with his mansion couldn't have been starker. New Hope Shelter struggled against its own name. Cracked windows taped over, peeling walls, a dimly lit entrance protected by a metal door with bars. Frank was waiting at the entrance, looking grave. "Thanks for coming so quickly," the detective said, shaking Ethan's hand. "I should warn you she's in rough condition. Volunteer doctors are treating the pneumonia, but she refuses to go to a hospital." Ethan nodded, buttoning his overcoat. The cold wind cut like blades. "Does she know about me? About the kid staying with me?" "Not exactly," Frank said. "I just told her I found her children and that they're safe." She was relieved, but also scared, I'd say. Like she's afraid of something. Inside the shelter, the air was heavy with the smell of cheap disinfectant and institutional food. A middle-aged woman with a badge identifying her as the director greeted them with a tired but kind expression. "Mr. Donovan, this is Mr. Carter," she asked, evaluating Ethan with eyes that had seen a lot. "Maya is in room 12 at the end of the hall. We managed to separate her from the other residents because of the pneumonia. She's on medication, but she's still weak. Please don't stress her. The corridor felt endless, each step amplifying the tension Ethan felt. What would he say to the mother who had abandoned her children? How would she react upon seeing him? And more importantly, what would happen next? Room 12 was small and Spartan, a single bed, a nightstand, and a plastic chair. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Maya. She was surprisingly young, maybe 23 or 24. Her dark hair, identical to Luna's, was disheveled and dull. Her pale, thin face still hinted at a beauty that poverty and illness couldn't completely erase. But it was her eyes that truly held Ethan's attention. The same intense blue as Luna's, now framed by deep circles. When she lifted her gaze and saw Ethan in the doorway, her whole body tensed. Instinctively, she shrank back on the bed like a cornered animal. "Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse, probably from coughing. Frank took a step forward. "Maya, this is Mr. Carter. He's the one who found Luna and Theo." Her eyes widened, a mix of hope and fear. They're okay." Ethan stepped into the room slowly, trying not to appear threatening. "Yes, they're fine. Theo's growing strong. Luna's been asking about you." A tear rolled down Maya's cheek. "Thank God," she whispered. I thought maybe..." "Thought maybe what?" Ethan asked, unable to keep the hardness entirely out of his voice. Maya lowered her gaze, shame evident on her face. That maybe they weren't okay. That no one had found them in time. The anger Ethan had been holding in since he found the children finally burst forth. "You left them alone. In the cold. A 5-year-old girl holding a 4-month-old baby. What did you think would happen?" Frank placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, as if to remind him to keep calm. Maya, however, did not respond defensively. Instead, her tears only increased. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know what I did. There isn't a minute I don't think about it." "Then why?" Ethan insisted. "Why abandon your children?" Maya coughed, a painful, deep sound. When she recovered, she looked at Ethan with a vulnerability that briefly disarmed him. "Because I thought they would be better off without me," she finally replied. "Because I couldn't be the mother they needed anymore. Because..." She hesitated, before admitting in an almost inaudible voice. "Because sometimes I looked at Theo and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it terrified me." Ethan sat in the plastic chair, processing what he had just heard. He knew enough about postpartum depression to recognize the signs. "Did you seek help?" Maya let out a bitter laugh, which quickly turned into more coughing. "With what money? What insurance? I could barely afford rent and feed my kids." The silence that followed was heavy. Frank muttered something about waiting outside and discreetly left, leaving Ethan and Maya alone. "Where are they now?" Maya asked after a few moments. "At my house," Ethan answered. "They're safe, well-fed, warmly dressed. A doctor examined them. Theo's gaining weight at a healthy rate. Luna is adjusting." "She must hate me," Maya whispered. "No," Ethan corrected. "She misses you. She asks about you every day. She tells her brother stories about Mom so he won't forget you." The words seemed to break something inside Maya. She covered her face with her hands and cried, deep sobs that shook her frail body. Ethan watched, feeling his initial anger gradually replaced by a complicated form of compassion. When she finally calmed down, Maya wiped her tears on the sleeve of her worn-out coat. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice still trembling. "Will you turn me in to the authorities? Will they take my children away forever? I'll understand if that's what you plan to do." Ethan hadn't planned on what he would do upon finding Maya. He had imagined different scenarios, from discovering a deranged, dangerous mother to finding a cold woman who simply didn't want her children anymore. But the reality, this young, sick, terrified woman consumed by guilt, was something he was unprepared for. The decision he made at that moment surprised even himself. "You're coming with me," he stated, "to my house. You can recover there, get proper medical treatment, and when you're better, you can see your children again." Maya stared at him, astonished. "Why? Why would you do that? You don't even know me." It was a fair question. Why did he care so much? Why was he so invested in the fate of this family who had been complete strangers to him just a few weeks before? Because your children need you, he answered simply, and you need help. It wasn't the whole answer, but it was true enough for the moment. An hour later, after signing a stack of papers releasing Maya from the shelter and assuring the director that she would receive adequate medical care, Ethan helped the young mother into his car. She was so weak she could barely walk, leaning heavily on him. "Thank you," she whispered when he shut the door. Don't say you don't deserve it," Ethan interrupted, starting the engine. "Your children deserve to have their mother back." "That's what I'm thinking about." During the drive back to the mansion, Maya remained silent, occasionally coughing or adjusting her thin coat that offered insufficient protection against the cold. Ethan turned the heat to the max and kept his eyes on the road, his mind racing ahead, planning how to handle the reunion with the kids. "Luna's gotten so big," he commented, trying to fill the silence. "And very smart. She told me you were teaching her letters." A fragile smile appeared on Maya's lips. "Yes, we were learning the alphabet. She has always been very curious." "And how's Theo?" she asked after a moment. "He was so small for his age." "He's doing well. The pediatrician says he's gradually reaching the ideal weight," Ethan answered. "He smiles a lot, especially when Luna sings to him." Silent tears rolled down Maya's face, but she didn't make a sound. Ethan pretended not to notice, granting her the privacy she clearly needed. When they reached the mansion, Ethan had a plan in mind. Maya needed rest and medical treatment before seeing the children. The shock of their reunion might be too much for both her and Luna, especially given the mother's weakened state. He took her to a room on the ground floor, far enough from the children's rooms to provide privacy, yet close enough for the upcoming reunion. "I'll call Dr. Morgan to examine you," he explained, helping her sit on the bed. "After that, we'll talk about how to proceed with the children." Maya nodded weakly. "They're here now, in the house." "Yes, Luna's in lessons with a private tutor I hired. Theo's probably sleeping. He always takes a nap around this time." The surprise on Maya's face was evident. "Private lessons? You really took care of them well." "I did what I could," Ethan replied simply. Dr. Morgan arrived 30 minutes later. After a thorough examination, he confirmed the pneumonia diagnosis, though it was less advanced than they had feared. He prescribed stronger antibiotics and recommended complete rest. "She's malnourished and anemic," the doctor explained to Ethan when they stepped out of the room. "She'll need a special diet, supplements, and plenty of rest. Full recovery will take a few weeks." "Do whatever is necessary," Ethan authorized. "Any treatment, any specialist." That night was complicated. Ethan had to explain to Luna that a special guest was staying in the house, but that she was too sick to have visitors at the moment. The child, as perceptive as ever, studied him intensely. "It's Mom, isn't it?" she asked bluntly. Ethan hesitated for just a second. "Yes, Luna. Your mother is here, but she's very sick. We need to let her rest for a few days before you can see her." Luna was silent for a long moment, processing the information. Her small hands clutched the stuffed elephant she carried everywhere. "Is she going away again?" she finally asked, her voice so small it was barely audible. Ethan's heart twisted. "No, Luna, she's not going away. She's here to stay with you and Theo." The girl nodded, but Ethan could see the doubt in her eyes. The abandonment had left scars that would take time to heal. Over the next 3 days, Maya remained in recovery, gradually gaining strength through proper food and medication. Ethan visited her daily, bringing news of the children and occasionally the drawings Luna made for the special guest. On the afternoon of the 4th day, while he was reading one of his company reports, Ethan received a message from Mrs. Powell, informing him that Maya was feeling stronger and had asked to speak with him. He found her sitting in an armchair by the window, looking out at the snow-covered garden. There was new color in her cheeks, and her eyes seemed more alert. "The meds are working," she commented when Ethan entered. "I'm feeling stronger." "I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Carter. She hesitated. "I want to thank you for everything you've done, for taking care of my kids and for bringing me here. I know you had no obligation." Ethan sat in the opposite chair. "You don't need to thank me, and please, call me Ethan." Maya nodded, pushing a lock of hair behind her ear, a gesture that reminded Ethan of Luna. "I think I'm ready," she said, "to see my children." If you think they're ready to see me. This was the moment Ethan had awaited and dreaded in equal measure. He knew the children, especially Luna, needed their mother. But he also worried about how they would react. Luna with her fear of abandonment. Theo, who might not even recognize Maya now. Luna knows you're here, he explained. I didn't say it outright, but she's clever. I think she's apprehensive. She has every right to be, Maya answered, guilt evident in her voice. What I did, I will never fully forgive myself. You were ill, Ethan said, surprising himself with his own understanding. Untreated postpartum depression, severe poverty, no support. I'm not excusing the abandonment, but I understand how you got to that point. Maya looked at him with disconcerting intensity. Why do you care so much? Most people would have just turned us over to the authorities and moved on with their lives. It was a question Ethan had been asking himself these past weeks. Why did he care so much? What made him invest time, money, and emotional energy in people who, until a month ago, were complete strangers? I can't fully explain, he admitted. Maybe because when I look at Luna and Theo, I see two children who deserve a chance, and so do you. Maya watched him for a long moment, as though trying to solve a riddle. So you know, it's strange, she finally said. Sometimes when you smile, which isn't very often, by the way, you remind me of someone. Who? Ethan asked, feeling oddly unsettled by her observation. I'm not sure exactly. A photograph, maybe, that my mother used to have. Something about the mention of Maya's mother caught Ethan's attention. Your mother? Yes. She passed away when I was 16, Maya explained. That's when everything started to fall apart for me. I never knew my father, you know. My mother said he was an important man, powerful, owned buildings or something like that. Ethan felt a strange tingling at the back of his neck. She never said his name. Maya frowned, trying to remember. She didn't talk much about him. She said it was a closed chapter. But once, when she drank too much on my 15th birthday, she mentioned that she'd worked for him as a personal assistant, that they had an affair, and when she got pregnant, he sent her away. Made sure she went far and never tried to contact him again. The tingling turned into a chill that ran down Ethan's spine. Your mother, what was her name? Elena. Elena Suarez, Maya answered, looking confused by his sudden interest. Why? Elena Suarez. The name hit Ethan like a punch. He recalled it vaguely. A pretty young woman who had worked for his father for a few months when he was a teenager. He also remembered how she had suddenly disappeared, and how his father had been strangely irritable when questioned about it. And do you know, Ethan struggled to keep his voice steady. Do you know the name of the man? Your father's name? Maya shrugged. She never said much about it. She didn't talk about him openly, but once she mentioned his name was Richard, I think. Yes, Richard. I don't remember the last name. Why are you asking? Richard Carter, his father. The realization struck Ethan with devastating force. If what Maya was saying was true, and something inside him told him it was, then she was his half-sister. Luna and Theo were his niece and nephew. The family he had taken in, by some inexplicable twist of fate, was his own blood. Ethan abruptly stood up, needing space to breathe, to think. Maya watched him, worry written on her face. Ethan, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya, he began, his voice sounding strange even to himself. My father's full name is Richard Carter. Now it was Maya's turn to go pale. What? Richard Carter, owner of Carter Enterprises, one of the biggest real estate developers in the country. No, Maya whispered, shocked. That can't be. Elena Suarez worked as his personal assistant for about 6 months, 24 years ago, Ethan continued, recalling details he didn't realize he still had. Then she disappeared. My father never explained why. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide. That means she couldn't finish the sentence. We're half-siblings, Ethan concluded, still reeling, and Luna and Theo are my niece and nephew. The ensuing silence was deafening. Both stared at each other, trying to process the magnitude of what they had just discovered. That's why, Maya finally said, her voice trembling, that's why you felt so connected to them. Why you couldn't ignore us that night? Ethan nodded slowly. There had to be something, an unconscious recognition, perhaps, some call of the blood he couldn't ignore. My God, Maya whispered. All these years, my mother never told me who he really was. She just said he was rich and powerful. I never imagined. And my father, Ethan said, anger beginning to replace the shock, deliberately kept your mother away, kept you away, his own daughter. The full implication of what his father had done, denying his own child's existence, sending away a pregnant woman, ensuring she never contacted him again, began to settle over Ethan. It was cruel, calculating, and completely in line with the man Richard Carter was. Maya looked equally shaken. All these years struggling, going hungry, when we had a father, a grandfather for Luna and Theo, who could have helped us. He's going to find out, Ethan declared, a cold determination forming within him. I'll make sure he knows exactly what he's done. But before they could continue, they were interrupted by a hesitant knock on the door. Mrs. Powell entered, looking concerned. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Carter, but Luna insists on seeing the special guest. She's quite upset and I can't convince her to wait any longer. Ethan and Maya exchanged looks. The conversation about Richard Carter would have to wait. There were more immediate matters to handle. Are you ready? Ethan asked Maya. She took a deep breath, nervousness plain on her face. I don't know if I'll ever be completely ready, but yes, I want to see my children. Please bring Luna here, Ethan instructed the housekeeper. And ask the nanny to bring Theo too. While they waited, Ethan watched Maya nervously smooth her hair and adjust the new clothes he had provided for her. The shock of discovering their shared parentage still lingered, but they silently agreed to focus on what mattered now, a mother reuniting with her children. The door opened again, and there was Luna standing on the threshold, her big blue eyes fixed on her mother. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, in a voice smaller than Ethan had ever heard from her, "Mom." Maya rose, tears already running down her face. "Yes, my love. It's Mom." What happened next was a tentative dance of reconciliation. Luna took a step forward, then paused, clearly torn between the urge to run into her mother's arms and the newly acquired fear of being abandoned again. "You disappeared," the girl accused, her voice trembling. "I know, my love," Maya replied, dropping to her knees to be at her daughter's level. "Mom got sick. Very sick. Not just here," she pointed to her chest, indicating pneumonia, "but also here," pointing to her head. "But I'm better now, and I will never, ever leave you or your brother again." Luna looked at Ethan, as if seeking confirmation. He nodded encouragingly. With the validation she seemed to need, the girl finally ran into her mother's arms. The embrace between them was so intense, so charged with emotion, that Ethan felt his own eyes grow damp. The nanny entered soon after, carrying Theo, who seemed confused by all the commotion. When Maya finally took the baby in her arms, sobbing with joy at how much he had grown and developed, Ethan knew that regardless of the complications the revelation about their parentage would bring, he had done the right thing. This family, his family, he now realized, was together again. And as he watched the scene, he made a silent resolution. He would do everything in his power to ensure they stayed that way, safe and together. Even if that meant confronting Richard Carter and exposing decades of secrets and lies. Dawn's light filtered through the curtains of Ethan's office. He hadn't slept. The revelation that Maya was his half-sister, that his father had deliberately abandoned a daughter, had kept him awake all night, revisiting memories and questioning everything he thought he knew about Richard Carter. His father had always been a cold, distant man. No surprise there. Ethan grew up under the shadow of a corporate empire that always seemed more important to his father than he did. After his mother's death, the emotional gap between father and son only widened, turning their relationship into one based on professional expectations and the occasional formal dinner. But this, consciously abandoning a daughter, sending a pregnant woman away, making sure this problem never came to light, was different. There was a calculated cruelty to it that Ethan struggled to fully comprehend. He twirled the glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the amber liquid reflect the rising sunlight. He hadn't drunk it. He needed a clear head. In 2 hours, he would be sitting face to face with Richard Carter, confronting him with a truth that could shatter the carefully constructed image of the family patriarch. "Mr. Ethan," Mrs. Powell's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I'm sorry to bother you so early, but Miss Luna is asking if she can have breakfast with her mother this morning." Ethan smiled slightly. In the days since the reunion, Luna had oscillated between not wanting to leave her mother's side and maintaining a cautious emotional distance, as though fearful of investing fully in the relationship again. "Of course, Mrs. Powell, please arrange breakfast for them in the smaller dining room, and see if Maya needs help coming downstairs." After the housekeeper left, Ethan turned his attention back to the immediate problem: how to confront his father. Which words to use? What reaction should he expect? At 72, Richard Carter still ran Carter Enterprises with an iron hand. Known for his intolerance of surprises and his ability to turn emotions into business strategies, Richard would not take well to the news that his illegitimate daughter, now a 24-year-old with 2 kids, had resurfaced. Ethan checked his watch. It was time to prepare for battle. Iku Umunduan Carter Enterprises headquarters occupied an entire city block in the financial district. Its imposing glass and steel architecture perfectly reflected its founder's personality: impressive, cold, and unyielding. Ethan walked through the main lobby with determined steps, acknowledging the employees who greeted him only with a distracted nod. As the executive vice president, his presence was not unusual. What was unusual was the anxious anticipation he felt, the weight of what he was about to do. "Mr. Carter, your father is waiting," Richard's assistant informed him when Ethan reached the executive floor. "Can I get you something? Coffee, perhaps?" "No, thank you, Claire," he replied automatically, adjusting his tie. The woman nodded and opened the door to the presidential office, a spacious room with a panoramic view of the city. Richard Carter stood by the window, surveying the empire he had built with his own hands. At 72, he still maintained an upright posture and the intimidating presence that had always characterized him. "Ethan," he greeted, turning. "What a pleasant surprise. Your emails rarely request meetings without specifying the subject." "Dad," Ethan replied, closing the door behind him. "Thank you for seeing me." Richard gestured for him to sit. "I'm curious." "It's not like you to be mysterious." Ethan took his seat in front of the imposing desk, observing the man who raised him, the man who, he'd recently discovered, was capable of cruelty beyond even his worst estimates. "How is your health?" he asked, stalling the inevitable for a few moments. Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised by the personal question. "Excellent, as always. The doctors insist I should slow down, but you know how it is, the company won't run itself." Ethan nodded, mustering the courage for what needed to be said. He had rehearsed a dozen different approaches, but none felt adequate now. "Dad," he began finally, "there's something I recently discovered, something about you." "About the past?" Richard's face hardened almost imperceptibly. After decades building an empire, there were undoubtedly many secrets he'd rather keep buried. "And what might that be?" Ethan took a deep breath, meeting his father's gaze directly. "You have another daughter, and she spent her life not knowing who you were." The statement hung in the air between them like a bomb about to explode. For a brief moment, Richard showed no reaction, only a slight narrowing of his eyes, a nearly imperceptible tightening of his jaw. "What exactly are you talking about?" His voice was controlled, but Ethan knew that tone well. It was the one Richard used when a business adversary tried to corner him. "Elena Soares," Ethan replied, watching his father closely. "Your personal assistant 24 years ago, the woman you sent away when you found out she was pregnant." Richard's face paled slightly, but he maintained a carefully neutral expression. "That's absurd. Elena Soares resigned for personal reasons. If she was pregnant, she never told me." The lie was so brazen that Ethan felt another wave of anger rise in his throat. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Not about this." Not when I've met your daughter. Not when I saw your grandchildren, your own grandchildren, almost freeze to death on a winter night. Richard abruptly stood, turning again to the window as if needing to hide his expression. What are you talking about? What grandchildren? Ethan, is this some kind of... Her name is Maya, Ethan interrupted. She's 24. Her blue eyes are identical to mine, to yours. She survived all these years without any help from you. Her mother, Elena, died when Maya was 16. She told Maya her father was a powerful man, an owner of major buildings, who sent her away as soon as he knew about the pregnancy. Richard remained silent, his silhouette rigid against the urban landscape beyond the window. Maya has 2 children, Ethan pressed on. Luna, 5 years, and Theo, 4 months. You'd recognize Luna if you saw her. She has that stubborn Carter chin, the same one I have, the one you always bragged about. Richard turned slowly, his face an impenetrable mask. And how exactly did you meet this person? The deliberate coldness with which Richard referred to his own daughter only fueled Ethan's indignation. I found her by chance. Or maybe it wasn't chance, he replied. Luna approached me outside an event, carrying her baby brother. She asked me to take them because they were cold and hungry. Their mother, Maya, your daughter, was ill. Untreated postpartum depression, pneumonia, malnutrition. She abandoned the kids in desperation, believing they'd be better off without her. A flicker of something, shock, perhaps remorse, crossed Richard's face before he could suppress it. How can I be sure this woman is really my daughter? She could be anyone looking to extort money from the family. Ethan almost laughed at the irony. She hasn't asked for a single thing. She doesn't even know I'm here talking to you. In fact, she was shocked when she found out who you really are. She grew up in poverty, Dad, struggling to survive. While you built this empire, your own daughter often went without food. Richard sat down again, running a hand over his face in a rare display of loss of control. Fair assuming what you say is true, he began, his voice carefully modulated. What exactly do you expect me to do now, after 24 years? The question hit Ethan hard. What did he expect exactly? That his father, at 72, would suddenly become the loving father he never was? That he would embrace a daughter he never knew? Grandchildren whose existence he'd only just learned of? I expect you to face the consequences of your actions, Ethan finally replied. To take responsibility, to acknowledge Maya as your daughter, my sister, to meet your grandchildren. Richard let out a short, humorless laugh. And risk a scandal that could affect the stock value, stir up gossip that would tarnish the company's name. Do you understand what you're asking? The response was so perfectly Richard Carter that Ethan felt a fresh surge of anger. That's what concerns you, the stock value, not the fact that you abandoned your own daughter, that your grandchildren almost froze to death. Don't be naive, Richard retorted, regaining some of his usual composure. Men in my position deal with complications all the time. It was more than 2 decades ago. Her mother could have sought financial support through the proper channels. Proper channels? Ethan repeated, incredulous. You sent her away, Dad. Probably threatened her, knowing your methods. Richard did not deny the accusation, which in itself was an admission. It was a complicated situation, he said at last. Your mother's health was fragile at the time. A scandal would have destroyed everything. I did what I thought was necessary to protect the family. To protect you. Don't use me as an excuse, Ethan shot back, standing up. You did it to protect yourself, your ego, your public image. For a long moment, father and son glared at each other in silence. The tension was almost tangible. What do you want me to do, Ethan? Richard finally asked, his voice lower, almost resigned. I want you to come with me. Today. Meet Maya. See your grandchildren. For once in your life, do the right thing. Not because it's convenient or profitable, but because it's right. Richard closed his eyes briefly, as if weighing the gravity of that request. When he opened them again, they held a cold resolve. And if I refuse? Ethan had not expected it to be easy, but his father's resistance still disappointed him. Then you'll lose what little respect I have left for you, he stated simply. And I'll go on supporting Maya and the kids on my own. But understand this, I'll never look at you the same way again. I'll know exactly what kind of man you truly are. The thinly veiled threat did not go unnoticed. Richard Carter might have been many things. but never stupid. He knew that despite his failings as a father, Ethan was his only family, his heir, his legacy. Losing his son's respect was something even he, with all his coldness, did not desire. After what felt like an eternity, Richard slowly got to his feet. "One visit," he said, his voice firm. "I'll meet her, but I promise nothing more than that." It wasn't exactly what Ethan wanted, but it was a start. He nodded, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and apprehension. The initial battle was won, but the real war, the possibility of genuine reconciliation, was just beginning. "My car is downstairs," he informed. "We can go now." Richard glanced around, as though searching for an escape that didn't exist. Then, with an almost imperceptible sigh, he grabbed the suit jacket hanging on a nearby rack. "Let's get this over with," he said, heading toward the door with firm steps but missing the usual air of authority. Ethan followed, envisioning the meeting that was about to take place. Maya, still fragile, facing the father she never knew. Richard, forced to confront the living proof of a mistake he had tried to bury 2 decades ago. He could only hope that by the end of that day, something good might emerge from so many years of denial and abandonment. If not for Richard, then at least for Maya and her children, who deserved, finally, to know their true story. The ride from the office to the mansion was made in silence. Ethan kept his eyes on the road while Richard stared out the window, his expression unreadable. Occasionally, Ethan glanced at his father from the corner of his eye, attempting to guess what was on his mind. It was impossible. "I prepared Maya for this meeting," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence. "She's nervous." Richard adjusted his tie, a gesture Ethan recognized as a sign of discomfort. "And what exactly did you tell her?" "The truth, that you're her father, that you never knew about her until now." A partial lie. Ethan had omitted the fact that Richard had deliberately sent Elena away upon learning of the pregnancy. He thought it best for Maya to hear that part of the story or see his father's reaction firsthand. As the car finally passed through the mansion gates, Richard straightened in his seat, reclaiming the mask of control he had worn all his life. "Remember, Dad," Ethan said as he parked, "these are real people. Your daughter, your grandchildren. Not problems to be managed." Richard did not respond, merely stepping out of the car as Charles opened the door. Mrs. Powell greeted them in the entryway, her expression revealing that she understood the importance of this moment. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Richard, Miss Maya and the children are in the living room." "Thank you, Mrs. Powell," Ethan replied, leading his father down the hallway. Before entering, Richard paused, a rare display of hesitation. How should I address her? The question caught Ethan off guard. For a brief moment, he saw something he rarely associated with his father: vulnerability. "By her name, Maya." Richard gave a curt nod and resumed his stiff posture. Ethan opened the door to the living room, stepping inside first. Maya sat on the sofa wearing a simple dress Ethan had bought for her. Her dark hair was tied in a loose bun, and her blue eyes, so similar to Ethan's, showed a mix of anxiety and resolve. Luna was playing on the rug with her blocks, while Theo slept peacefully in a portable crib nearby. "Maya," Ethan said softly, "this is Richard Carter, my father." Richard entered the room with the upright posture and controlled expression he reserved for important business meetings. But when his eyes met Maya's, something in his face changed, a slight furrow of his brow, an almost imperceptible hesitation. "Hello," he said, his voice lower than usual. Maya stood slowly, her hands trembling. For a moment, she just stared at the man before her, the man her mother said was her biological father, the man she had never known, whose existence was only a vague mention her whole life. "Mr. Carter," she finally replied, her voice firm despite her obvious nervousness. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Ethan could feel the tension rising, watching as Richard studied Maya, her face, her features, perhaps searching for resemblances that would confirm or deny the relationship. "Please, sit," Ethan suggested, trying to ease the heavy atmosphere. Maya returned to the sofa, while Richard chose the armchair opposite her, keeping the maximum distance. Ethan sat beside Maya, offering unspoken support. "So," Richard began, his tone artificially casual, "Ethan told me about you. About your mother." Maya nodded, her eyes never leaving Richard's. "Elena Suarez. She worked for you 24 years ago." "Yes, I remember her. She was a competent assistant." The cold description made Maya press her lips together. "She was more than an assistant to you, from what my mother told me." Richard shot Ethan a quick glance, then shifted in his seat. "Your mother and I had a brief relationship. Yes, it was a long time ago." "And when she got pregnant with me," Maya asked directly, "why did you never look for me? Why did you let us grow up in poverty when you had so much?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Richard cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I never knew Elena was pregnant," he said, his voice taking on the convincing tone he used to close deals. "She quit abruptly. She said she was returning to her hometown. She never mentioned pregnancy." Ethan watched the lie flow easily from his father's lips, feeling another wave of disappointment and anger. Maya, for her part, looked at Ethan in confusion. "That's not what my mother told me," she retorted, turning her attention back to Richard. "She told me you sent her away when you found out. That you made sure she moved far away and never tried to contact you again. That you threatened her." Richard kept his face neutral, but Ethan noticed the slight narrowing of his eyes, a sign that he was calculating his response. "Your mother was confused. Maybe she misinterpreted the situation. Or maybe," he paused, his tone turning colder, "she preferred to create a different narrative to explain her absence in your life." That was the last straw for Ethan. "Enough lies, Dad," he interrupted firmly. "I found the records, the confidentiality agreement you made Elena sign, the lump sum payment so she would disappear, the relocation to a city thousands of miles away." Maya turned pale, while Richard visibly stiffened, his gaze now icy. "You had no right to investigate that," he said to Ethan, his voice dangerously controlled. "And you had no right to abandon your own daughter," Ethan shot back, "to deny her existence, to let her grow up without knowing who her father was." The tension between father and son was almost palpable. Maya watched their exchange, her hands trembling, when movement on the rug drew everyone's attention. Luna, who had silently been playing with her blocks, now stood, watching Richard with childlike curiosity. She took a few steps toward him, stopping at a safe distance. "Are you my grandpa?" she asked innocently, her small voice slicing through the tension like a knife. The question seemed to hit Richard like a physical blow. For the first time in Ethan's memory, his father appeared genuinely at a loss for words. His gaze moved from little Luna to Maya, then to Ethan, and finally back to the small girl whose simple question threatened to shatter decades of denial in one instant. He began, his voice failing him. Luna tilted her head, puzzled by the adult's hesitation. "Mr. Ethan said you're my mom's dad, so that makes you my grandpa, right?" The silence that followed was deafening. Maya seemed frozen, torn between the urge to protect her daughter and the need to witness this critical moment. Ethan watched intently, knowing that his father's answer would define much about the future of this newly discovered family. Richard Carter, the man who built an empire on cold issue, calculated decisions, now faced a question no corporate strategy could prepare him for. And for the first time in his life, he looked completely vulnerable before a 5-year-old girl who simply wanted to hear a basic confirmation of belonging. The silence in his penthouse apartment had never felt so oppressive. Richard Carter remained motionless before the panoramic window, staring at the city lights that usually filled him with pride. Tonight, however, not even the impressive view of his empire could calm the storm inside him. Luna's question echoed incessantly in his mind. "Are you my grandpa?" So simple, so innocent, yet so devastating. Richard lifted his whiskey glass to his lips but didn't drink. The amber liquid, once his refuge after tough negotiation days, now seemed tasteless. He placed the glass on a nearby table and ran his hands over his tired face. After Luna's question, he had mumbled some vague response, something about needing to talk to the adults first. The disappointment in the child's eyes had been clear, even to someone as unaccustomed to children as he was. After that, the visit ended quickly. Ethan had driven him back to the office in tense silence, broken only by a single phrase as they parted. "Think carefully about what you'll do now, Dad." And that was exactly what Richard was doing. Thinking, remembering, confronting the truths he had buried for decades. Elena Suarez. Her face emerged sharply in his memory, young, beautiful, with those same penetrating blue eyes he now saw in Maya and Luna. At the time, he had been going through a turbulent phase in his marriage. His wife was ill, his teenage son was growing increasingly distant. The business pressure was immense. Elena had been a momentary escape, a temporary comfort. When she announced the pregnancy, his first instinct was panic, scandal, destruction of his public image, divorce. Everything he'd built was at risk. The solution seemed obvious and necessary. Send her away. A generous financial arrangement, at least that's how he saw it then, in exchange for silence and distance. Richard walked slowly to his personal study, opened a rarely used drawer, and took out a yellowed envelope. Inside was a single photograph, Elena, smiling at a corporate event. He'd kept the photo for reasons he never wanted to examine. Now, looking at that young face, the truth was inescapable. He had a daughter, and not just a daughter, but grandchildren. An entire family whose existence he had denied, not through ignorance, as he had claimed to Maya and Ethan, but by deliberate choice. He sank heavily into his leather chair, feeling for the first time the full weight of his 72 years. How many other decisions like that had he made over a lifetime? How many people had he cast aside, viewing them as mere obstacles on his path to success? His thoughts turned to Ethan, his only son, or so he had believed until now. He had always viewed their distance as a natural consequence of differing personalities. But now, forced to confront his own behavior patterns, an uncomfortable truth emerged. He had failed as a father long before abandoning Maya. He had failed Ethan too, just in a different way. The first lights of morning began to show on the horizon when Richard reached a conclusion. He had spent his life measuring success in dollars, properties, and power. He had built an empire, but at what cost? In the end, what truly mattered? He picked up the phone and dialed Ethan's number. When the call was answered, Richard's voice sounded different even to himself, softer, less authoritarian. "May I visit you all today? I want to meet my family." Ethan hung up the phone, genuinely surprised. He had never expected that call, much less the almost vulnerable tone in his father's normally imperious voice. Maya, who was making breakfast for Luna in the kitchen, raised her eyebrows in silent inquiry. "It was my father," Ethan explained. "He wants to come over today. Said he wants to meet the family." "Do you think he's sincere?" Maya asked, the distrust clear in her tone. Ethan weighed the question carefully. Richard Carter was not a man who changed his mind easily, nor a man who showed vulnerability. Throughout his life, Ethan had only known the calculating, pragmatic version of his father, a man for whom relationships were secondary to business objectives. Yet there had been something in Richard's voice that morning, a different inflection, as if, perhaps after all these years, the layers of coldness were finally starting to crack. "I think he is," Ethan replied at last. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he's actually thinking about someone besides himself. Richard Carter arrived promptly at 10 in the morning, no longer carrying the commanding air he usually wore, but rather a subtle hesitation. In his arms, he held 2 packages wrapped in colorful paper. Ethan greeted him at the door, noticing the dark circles marking his father's face. It was clear Richard hadn't slept much after their initial meeting with Maya and the children. "I brought something for Luna and Theo," Richard said, lifting the packages slightly. "I hope you don't mind." Ethan nodded and led him into the living room, where Maya sat stiffly on the sofa. She had carefully combed her hair and chosen a simple yet neat dress, small signs of how important this meeting was to her, despite the evident distrust in her eyes. Luna was playing on the rug with her blocks, while Theo slept peacefully in a nearby crib. When Richard entered, the girl looked up, her expression curious but cautious. "Good morning," Richard greeted, his voice gentler than usual. He hesitated a moment, then approached Maya. May I sit? She indicated the opposite armchair with a tense gesture. Sure. An uncomfortable silence hovered between them until Richard finally broke it. Maya, he began, placing the packages on the coffee table, I came here today mainly to say something I should have said yesterday, something I should have said 24 years ago. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I apologize. What I did to your mother, to you, was unforgivable. There's no justification that makes my actions acceptable. Maya kept her expression neutral, though her eyes revealed the emotional storm the apology provoked. Why apologize now? She asked, her voice controlled. Because you were caught. Because you can't deny it anymore. Richard didn't dodge the accusation. Partly, yes, he admitted, surprising both Maya and Ethan with his honesty. The truth is, I never really faced the consequences of my actions. I never saw the faces of the people I hurt with my decisions. His eyes briefly shifted to Luna, who watched the adults' conversation with childlike curiosity. Until now. Seeing that she was the center of attention, Luna stood up and cautiously approached. You brought presents? She asked, pointing to the packages. A slight smile, genuine, not calculated, touched Richard's lips. Yes, this one is for you, he said, handing her the larger package. And this one is for your little brother, for when he wakes up. With Maya's silent permission, Luna opened her gift, revealing a set of illustrated children's books. Her eyes lit up. They're stories, she exclaimed, flipping through the colorful pages. My secretary helped me choose them, Richard admitted. She said they're good for kids your age who are learning to read. I already know all the letters, Luna informed him proudly, and some words too. Really? Richard sounded genuinely impressed. Maybe we can read together someday. If your mother agrees, he added quickly, glancing at Maya. The tension in Maya's face eased slightly. We'll see, she replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the idea. In the weeks that followed, Richard became a regular visitor at the mansion. It started with short, supervised visits, an hour to read with Luna, half an hour observing Theo play on the rug. Gradually, the visits lengthened, a Sunday lunch, an afternoon in the garden. During each visit, Richard demonstrated a genuine effort. He learned the names of Luna's favorite toys, memorized Theo's nap schedule, listened attentively when Maya finally began to share fragments of her childhood, stories Elena told her about the young woman she'd been before pregnancy. For Ethan, the transformation was almost surreal. Seeing his father, the relentless Richard Carter, sitting on the floor assembling puzzles with Luna, or awkwardly holding Theo while attempting to feed him a bottle, were sights he had never imagined. He's really trying, he remarked to Maya one night, after Richard left following a family dinner. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, he is, but I still don't know if I can fully trust him. 24 years is a long time, Ethan. I know, I have my reservations too, but there's something different about him, something I've never seen before. What Ethan didn't know was that his observation was more accurate than he realized. The change in Richard came not just from remorse or a late desire to know his daughter and grandchildren. There was something else, something Richard was keeping secret. Until, on a rainy afternoon a month after his regular visits began, Richard asked to speak with Ethan and Maya in private. Mrs. Powell had taken the children to the kitchen for a snack, leaving the three adults alone in the library. There's something you both need to know, Richard began, his voice graver than usual. Something that might explain, though not excuse, my sudden change. Ethan felt his chest tighten, a dark premonition forming. I've been diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer, Richard revealed bluntly. The doctors gave me 6 to 8 months. The statement landed like a bomb in the room. Maya covered her mouth with her hand, while Ethan felt as if the floor had dropped from under him. When? He finally managed to ask. When did you find out? 3 weeks before Ethan came to me about you, Richard said, looking at Maya. At first, I kept it secret. I didn't want you to think my approach was solely because of the illness. But it is, Maya concluded, her voice shaking. Richard shook his head. Not entirely. The illness forced me to reevaluate my life, yes. But meeting you, Luna, and Theo, that was an unexpected gift. One I didn't deserve but am deeply grateful for. Silent tears streaked Maya's cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness for a father she barely knew, but for the complexity of the situation. How do you hate a dying man? How do you deny forgiveness to someone who soon won't be there to receive it? Why tell us now? Ethan asked, his voice tight with emotion. Because I don't want more secrets, Richard replied simply. I've spent my life hiding truths, manipulating situations. I don't want to die like that. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken implications. Richard's illness changed everything. The time they had together, the process of building trust, the very nature of any forgiveness Maya might or might not grant. What do you want from us, exactly? Maya finally asked, her voice regaining some firmness. Richard met her gaze directly. Time, just time with you, with your children. A chance to really know you all, to be part of the family, even briefly. It was a simple request, but loaded with meaning. Not just physical time, but emotional openness, hearts long closed off by hurt and abandonment. Ethan watched Maya closely, aware that the decision was primarily hers. 24 years of absence could not be erased, even in the face of impending death. Forgiveness, if it came, had to be a conscious choice, not an obligation imposed by the gravity of circumstances. I need to think, Maya said at last, standing up. This is a lot to process all at once. Richard nodded, accepting her answer without protest. I understand. I'll take whatever time you're willing to give me. After Maya left the room, Ethan remained seated, facing his father with a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anger at a lifetime of emotional distance, sadness for the illness that now threatened to take him away for good, confusion about how to handle this new reality. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard exhaled deeply. Because you already had enough reasons to resent me. I didn't want your concern to be driven by pity or obligation. It was a surprisingly considerate answer, from a man Ethan had always believed incapable of such sensitivity. And now, Ethan asked, a question filled with everything unspoken about the future, forgiveness, and how to rearrange relationships under the shadow of a ticking clock. Richard looked out the window, watching the gentle rain outside. Now we wait, and if we're lucky, we learn how to be a family before it's too late. Spring arrived like a perfect metaphor for the transformations taking place at the Carter mansion. The garden, once meticulously maintained but rarely enjoyed, became a stage for Luna's playtime, her laughter echoing through the open windows. Theo, now 7 months old, crawled across the grass under Maya's watchful eye, blooming with renewed vitality. Sitting on the porch, observing his family, Ethan barely recognized his own life. Just 3 months ago, his daily routine was long hours at the office, solitary nights reviewing contracts, and occasional social events where he maintained the facade of a successful businessman. Now, his house, once merely a prestigious address, never truly a home, overflowed with life. She's doing much better, Mrs. Powell commented, approaching with a tray of lemonade. Miss Maya, she hardly looks like the same person who arrived here. Ethan nodded, taking one of the glasses. The doctors say she's fully recovered from pneumonia, and Dr. Winters believes her postpartum depression is also under control. It's not just her physical health, the housekeeper observed with the wisdom of someone who'd seen many transformations over the years. It's something else. A light inside her has returned. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. Over the past weeks, Maya had blossomed. The fragile, distrustful young woman he met at the shelter had given way to someone determined to rebuild her life. She had started an online graphic design course, a passion she'd abandoned when she became pregnant with Luna, and she was already talking about finding a job once she felt confident in her skills. Most importantly, Maya had reclaimed her identity as a mother. The guilt that had consumed her over abandoning her children gradually transformed into a fierce resolve to make up for lost time, to give Luna and Theo the safe and loving childhood she herself had never known. Ethan! Luna's voice broke his train of thought. The girl was running toward him, something in her hands. Look what I found. He leaned forward to see the small daisy she offered like a priceless treasure. It's beautiful, Luna. Where did you find it? By the fountain, there are lots of them. I'm going to make a crown for Theo. Before Ethan could respond, she was already dashing back to the garden, her yellow dress fluttering like a bird's wings. She's extraordinary, Mrs. Powell said with a smile. So resilient. Like her mother, Ethan replied, his gaze meeting Maya's in the garden. The housekeeper nodded and left discreetly, allowing Ethan to remain with his thoughts. He was still amazed by the transformation of his life. As an executive at Carter Enterprises, he was accustomed to evaluating everything in terms of assets and liabilities, gains and losses. But what he had gained with Maya, Luna, and Theo was immeasurable by any corporate standard. His once impeccable but soulless home was now truly a home. Luna's toys scattered across the living room, Theo's bottles in the kitchen, Maya's books on the coffee table, all created a cozy mess he never imagined wanting. The sound of an approaching car caught his attention. Through the main gate, a black Bentley was slowly driving in. Richard had arrived for his daily visit. Since revealing his illness 6 weeks earlier, Richard had come by every day. Initially, there was resistance, Maya still processing the complexity of forgiving a dying father who had abandoned her, Ethan confronting decades of emotional detachment. But gradually, Richard's presence had become not just accepted, but expected. Ethan watched his father step out of the car, noting how he appeared both more fragile and more human. The cancer was taking its physical toll. Richard had lost weight. His skin had a slightly yellowish tone, and sometimes a flash of pain crossed his face when he thought no one was looking. Yet there was also a new vitality in Richard, not physical, but spiritual. As if, standing on the brink of death, he had finally discovered what it meant to truly live. "Grandpa's here," Luna shouted, abandoning her flower collecting to run toward him. It was still surprising for Ethan to hear that word, Grandpa, associated with the always formal Richard Carter. More surprising still was seeing how his father responded, crouching down, with some difficulty now, to receive the girl's enthusiastic hug. "I brought something for you, little one," Richard said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Luna opened it with eager fingers, revealing a delicate necklace with an elephant pendant. "It's just like Dumbo," she exclaimed, referring to the stuffed elephant Ethan had given her in her first days at the mansion. "Your dad told me you love elephants," Richard explained, helping her put the necklace on. "This one is special. See, it has your name engraved on the back." Ethan observed the scene with mixed emotions. This was a Richard he had never known during his own childhood. Attentive, present, genuinely interested in the little details that make a person. The illness had stripped away the layers of formality and calculation that had always defined Richard Carter, revealing a man capable of tenderness and emotional connection. Maya approached with Theo in her arms, and Richard's face lit up even more. "How's my little champ today?" he asked, extending his arms to hold the baby. Maya carefully handed over Theo with a cautious but genuine smile. "He's learning to stand by, holding onto furniture. Doctor Patterson says he might start walking sooner than expected." "A precocious Carter," Richard commented with evident pride. "Doesn't surprise me." Ethan joined them, feeling an unfamiliar sense of wholeness seeing his family gathered. It was a situation he never would have imagined. His father, the half-sister he hadn't known existed a few months ago, and 2 children who had stolen his heart. And yet, it felt right, as though fate had finally corrected an old wrong. "I was thinking we could have a picnic today," he suggested, pointing to the basket Mrs. Powell had prepared. "It's a perfect day." While Maya and Luna spread the blanket and laid out food in a shady spot on the lawn, Richard turned to Ethan, still holding Theo. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. For giving me this chance." Ethan studied his father's face, the new lines, the eyes that had lost some of their trademark hardness. "I didn't do it for you," he answered honestly. "I did it for Maya, for Luna and Theo, for me too, in a way." Richard nodded. "I know, and that's why I'm grateful. You could have kept them all to yourself. It would have been easier. Maybe more deserved, even." It was the closest thing to genuine vulnerability Ethan had ever heard from his father. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan asked. deliberately changing the subject. "Good enough," Richard replied with a small smile. "The new meds are helping with the pain. And this," he added, looking at Theo, who was happily tugging on his tie, "is the best medicine I could ask for." The outdoor lunch was surprisingly light-hearted. Luna entertained everyone with elaborate stories about her toys' adventures, while Theo clapped and babbled happily, trying to imitate his sister. Richard, seated in a garden chair brought especially for him, observed everything with eyes that held both joy and understandable melancholy. "I need to capture this," Ethan declared at some point, grabbing his phone to snap a photo of the scene. "No," Richard protested automatically, always averse to having intimate moments documented. Then, as if reconsidering, he relaxed. "Or rather, yes, please do. I want them to remember." The unspoken implication that soon there would be only memories of him briefly cast a shadow over the group, before Luna broke it by insisting on making funny faces for the camera. After lunch, when Luna persuaded Richard to help her build a fairy castle out of twigs and flowers, Maya seized the opportunity to sit beside Ethan on the garden bench. "Gert strange, isn't it?" she remarked, watching the unlikely sight of Richard Carter, the real estate magnate, kneeling on the grass with Luna. "How everything changed so fast." Ethan nodded. "If someone had told me 4 months ago my life would look like this now, I would have laughed." Maya turned to face him, her eyes so similar to his, suddenly serious. "I never thanked you properly, for everything, for finding my kids that night, for not handing us over to the authorities, for finding me and bringing me here when I was sick, for giving us a home." "It wasn't purely altruistic," Ethan admitted. "Even before I knew we were family, there was something about Luna and Theo that filled a void I didn't realize I had." The unexpectedly intimate confession opened a space to address what they both had quietly avoided. "What was your childhood like with him?" Maya asked softly, indicating Richard with a slight nod. "I always wondered what it would be like to have a father, especially one like him." Ethan considered the question, aiming for honesty without bitterness. He was physically present, but emotionally absent, always too busy building his empire to actually see me. "After my mother died, when I was 8, it got worse. I think he didn't know how to be a father without her as an intermediary." Maya nodded, understanding. "My mother used to say that sometimes the most confident people in an office are completely lost in front of a child." Exactly. Richard Carter could close a multi-million-dollar deal without blinking, but a parent-teacher meeting threw him into a panic. And yet, Maya observed, look at him now. Richard had allowed Luna to place small flowers in his grey hair while supervising the castle construction. His face, normally so controlled, displayed a genuine smile. "It's the time," Ethan said softly. "Knowing there isn't much left probably changes your perspective, I guess." "Do you think he would have changed without the illness?" Maya asked, voicing the question both had pondered silently. Ethan reflected for a moment. "Honestly, I'm not sure. But maybe that doesn't matter now. He is changing. He's trying. That's what we have." Maya rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, a fraternal gesture of closeness that had become natural in recent weeks. "It's funny how life works, isn't it? I spent so long wondering what it would be like to have a father, a complete family. Now I have it, but with an expiration date." "We all have an expiration date," Ethan replied gently. "We just don't usually know it so precisely." The silence that followed was comfortable, contemplative. Together, they watched Richard patiently helping Luna balance a stubborn branch on top of her structure, while Theo, seated on a nearby blanket, happily banged on a small plastic bowl. "I never had this," Ethan finally confessed, "this sense of belonging, of family. Even when my mother was alive, we were more like individuals living in the same space. After she was gone, it was just a formal coexistence between me and my father. And now, for the first time, I feel like I have a real family. It's both scary and wonderful." Maya smiled, squeezing his hand lightly. "Welcome to the club. It's messy, complicated, and absolutely essential." The afternoon passed peacefully. Theo eventually fell asleep in Richard's arms. and he refused to hand him over, even when his arm was clearly numb. Luna, tireless as ever, convinced Ethan to push her on the new swing under an old oak tree. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, Mrs. Powell appeared to announce that dinner would be ready in an hour. "I didn't realize we'd been out here all day," Richard commented, reluctantly handing the still sleeping Theo to Maya. "The best days are like that," she replied with a smile. "Time goes by without us noticing." As they walked back to the house, Richard suddenly stopped, bracing himself against a nearby tree. His breathing was noticeably labored, and a pained expression crossed his face. "Dad?" Ethan approached quickly, alarmed. "Are you okay?" Richard gestured dismissively. "I just need a moment. The doctors warned me about these episodes." Maya handed Theo to Ethan and, to both men's surprise, offered her arm to Richard. "Lean on me. We'll go slowly." The family patriarch hesitated only for a second before accepting the help. Together, they walked slowly toward the house, Maya patiently matching his pace. "You know," Richard said, as they made their way along the stone path, "I spent my whole life thinking independence was the greatest virtue, needing no one. Now I see how wrong I was." "What do you mean?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "There's strength in needing people, in allowing yourself to be vulnerable. It took me 72 years and a death sentence to learn that," he replied with a sad smile. "I hope that you and Luna and Theo, and you too, Ethan," he added, looking at his son who was walking beside him, "learn it sooner than I did." "We're learning together," Ethan answered. When they reached the porch, Richard had to sit down for a moment to catch his breath. Luna, noticing something was amiss, approached cautiously. "Is Grandpa sick?" she asked. Her small brow creased with worry. Richard smiled at her, extending his hand to touch her cheek. "Grandpa's just a little tired, sweetheart, but I'm okay now." "Promise you'll come back tomorrow," Luna persisted, with a child's directness. "You promised to teach me to play chess." A flicker of emotion crossed Richard's face. "I promise I'll try, Luna, and if I can't make it tomorrow, I'll come the day after. Or you can visit me. I'm not going anywhere just yet." The promise, carefully qualified though it was, seemed to satisfy the girl, who smiled and dashed inside, announcing loudly to Mrs. Powell that she was hungry. "I should go," Richard said, standing up with some effort. "My doctor's coming tonight to adjust my medication." "Stay for dinner," Maya suggested, "unless you're too tired." The surprise and pleasure on Richard's face were evident. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," she replied, offering her arm again. "Besides, you promised chess to Luna. You might as well start tonight, don't you think?" Ethan watched as Maya guided Richard inside, talking calmly about Luna's progress with letters and numbers. Theo had woken up in his arms, blinking around in sleepy curiosity. "Your family's a bit complicated, little guy," Ethan murmured to the baby. "But we're figuring it out." During dinner, Richard made an unexpected announcement. "I've prepared some documents," he said, once Luna had been taken for her evening bath. "I want to ensure Maya and the kids are financially secure, no matter what happens." "Richard, that's not necessary," Maya began, but he raised his hand gently to stop her. "It is necessary. I can't make up for 24 years of absence, but I can ensure you'll never have to worry about a roof over your head, or food on the table, that Luna and Theo can go to the best schools, that you can follow your dreams without financial constraints." Maya looked at Ethan, who gave her a slight nod. "He's right, Maya. You deserve that security. The children deserve it. And there's something else," Richard continued, his voice softer now. "I want to be legally recognized as Maya's father, and as Luna and Theo's grandfather. I know it's just a piece of paper, but it's important to me, to leave that legacy clear." The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound the ticking of an old clock in the corner. "All right," Maya finally agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "I guess it's time Luna and Theo have an official grandfather." The smile that lit Richard's face was something Ethan would never forget, a look of pure joy, free of any calculation or ulterior motive. "Thank you," said Richard simply, "for giving me this second chance." 2 weeks later, on a particularly beautiful Sunday, the entire Carter family visited the city's Central Park. The idea came from Richard, who expressed a desire for a normal day like any normal family. Luna ran among the blooming shrubs, occasionally returning to show Richard some treasure she'd found, a strangely shaped leaf, a shiny pebble, a fallen feather. Theo, now almost able to take steps unaided, was patiently guided by Ethan, who held the baby's little hands as he ventured across the grass. Richard and Maya sat on a bench beneath a leafy tree, watching the scene. The family patriarch looked more fragile today, thinner, paler, but his eyes sparkled with a vitality that defied his deteriorating body. "I wish I'd done more days like this with Ethan," he remarked, following his son with his gaze. "So many missed opportunities." Maya, in a gesture unimaginable a few weeks ago, covered Richard's hand with hers. "It's never too late to try again." Richard turned to look at her, emotion evident on his face. "Even with so little time." "Especially with little time," she replied softly. "It makes every moment more valuable." When Ethan approached with Theo in his arms, he found Maya and Richard in a quiet conversation, their faces relaxed in a way that still surprised him. Luna soon joined them, insisting everyone try the world's best ice cream from a nearby vendor. Seated together in a semicircle on the grass, enjoying ice cream melting under the mild sun, Ethan was struck by a profound realization. His greatest fortune lay not in the buildings he owned, the stocks he controlled, or the bank accounts in his name. It was there, in that simple moment with people who, against all odds, had become his family. Richard, as if reading his thoughts, raised his ice cream cup in a silent toast. His eyes, now so similar to Maya's in their emotional clarity, conveyed a clear message: understanding, gratitude, love. None of them mentioned the limited time remaining. They didn't need to. The awareness of mortality made every moment more precious, every laugh more vibrant, every bond more meaningful. The Carter family, finally complete after decades of secrets and separation, had found their way back, not to the past they might have had, but to a present they chose to build together one day at a time. A young billionaire